Chapter 1. In the empty villa, Cecilia Payne sat motionless on the sofa. A long time passed before the front door opened and Ethan Shaw walked in. His eyes landed on her, paused for a moment, and then his face turned cold. "Yvonne has a fever today. Why did you call me so many times?" Cecilia stood up, her head still bowed in silence. She didn't answer, and Ethan didn't leave. After a while, she finally spoke in a small voice. "I needed you for something." "What could you possibly need? You're standing right here, perfectly fine. What could have happened?" Her explanation earned no understanding from him. Instead, it made his voice even colder. "Didn't I tell you that Yvonne was unwell and I would be with her all day? What are you trying to pull with this stunt? Cecilia, I've told you before, stop harboring those inappropriate feelings for me. I am your uncle. It's impossible between us. If you do this again, you can just move out." With that, Ethan went straight upstairs and slammed his bedroom door. Downstairs, Cecilia remained standing, quietly watching his retreating back as he ascended the stairs. She whispered, "Uncle, I'm sorry. There won't be a next time, because I'm already dead." Her voice was so soft that Ethan, already upstairs, didn't hear a word. Cecilia didn't mind. She sat back down on the sofa, her thoughts drifting back to the past. Ethan wasn't her real uncle, just a friend of her father's. From a very young age, she had loved to cling to him, calling him Big Brother. Each time, Ethan would patiently correct her. "Not brother, it's uncle." She finally switched to the correct term the year she turned 8, when Mr. and Mrs. Payne were both killed in a car accident. Ethan took her into his home. She was the rose he had meticulously and delicately raised, showering her with nearly all his affection. When she first arrived at the Shaw residence, she was so insecure about living under someone else's roof that she couldn't sleep through the night. It was he who, while juggling his work, patiently soothed her to sleep. She had been frail and sickly since childhood, relying on medicine to live. When she was 12, other members of the Shaw family, dissatisfied with Ethan supporting a sickly burden, demanded he send her away. Ethan refused. He would rather start his own company and move out of the family home than stop caring for her. It wasn't until later, when Ethan single-handedly founded SQ Corporation and built it into a company rivaling the Shaw Group, that his relationship with his family finally eased. When she was 15, Cecilia joined a school field trip that was struck by a mudslide. She nearly died. In that most perilous moment, it was he who braved the danger, went deep into the mountains, and rescued her. Growing up, whatever she wanted, even if it were the stars in the sky, he would promise without hesitation to pluck them for her. But what Cecilia remembered most vividly was the year her parents had just passed away. Her health was particularly fragile. Once, she had a high fever and was hospitalized for 3 days before waking up. When she awoke, she was terrified, clinging to Ethan and crying so hard she could barely breathe. She sobbed and asked him, "Uncle, am I going to die?" At that time, he had said, "Cease, as long as I don't agree, no one can take you from my side. Even if it's the king of hell, I will definitely snatch you back from him." He had spoken with such conviction, and he truly had protected her for a full decade. From 8 to 18, no matter how difficult it was, he never thought of giving up on her. But today, when a robber broke in and stabbed her more than a dozen times, Cecilia called him again and again, and he hung up again and again, all to take care of Yvonne Vance, who had a fever. Yvonne had appeared in their lives 3 months ago. That day, Cecilia had stolen a kiss while he was asleep, but he had woken up instantly, his face cold as he asked what she was doing. Seeing that Ethan had found out, she no longer hid her feelings and boldly confessed her love for him. But his eyes were filled with disbelief. He rejected her harshly, and to make her give up, he started going on frequent blind dates. Eventually, he brought back Yvonne, a woman who satisfied him in every aspect and was intimate with her in front of Cecilia every day. When Cecilia was dying, she made so many calls to him. Yvonne had actually answered once, but as soon as the call connected, before Cecilia could even get out a plea for help, Yvonne's voice came through the line. "Cecilia, is something wrong? Ethan is cooking porridge for me right now. He doesn't have time to take your call." After saying that, she hung up. The second the call ended, Cecilia took her last breath. After her death, her soul lingered, unwilling to dissipate due to her lingering obsession. The king of hell sensed the anomaly and sought her out. She seized the opportunity to make a deal with him. She traded her soul to be scattered to the winds, never to be reincarnated for a 7-day return to the mortal world to handle her own affairs. Cecilia walked over to a calendar. If Ethan had looked closely, he would have noticed that this calendar had only 7 pages. She stepped forward and tore off a page, murmuring, "Uncle, this is the first day of my farewell to you." Chapter 2. The next day, Cecilia got up very early and went out to close her accounts. Her death had been sudden. After a frantic night of research, she learned there was a mountain of affairs to handle after one's passing. But Ethan now had someone with whom he wanted to build a new family. As his adopted daughter, she was just a burden. She didn't want him to have to deal with these things and cause him more trouble. When she arrived at the public records office, the clerk was incredulous when she said she wanted to file her own death certificate. He confirmed with her several times, "Miss, you can only do this for someone who has passed away. Are you sure you want to do this?" Cecilia gave a bitter smile and nodded. "In 6 days, I will disappear from this world completely." Hearing this, the clerk assumed she had terminal cancer. He gave her a sympathetic look, glanced at her file, and felt even more regretful. She was only 18. The clerk didn't ask any more questions and processed the paperwork for her. After closing her accounts, Cecilia went to have a memorial portrait taken, and also bought herself an urn and a set of burial clothes. Everywhere she went, she was met with looks of pity or regret, but she paid them no mind. Right now, her only thought was to get all of this done herself, so that Ethan wouldn't have to worry about her affairs in the future. By the time she returned home after finishing this series of tasks, it was already evening. As soon as she walked in, she saw Yvonne Vance in the kitchen, busy cooking while wearing an apron. Seeing her return, Yvonne walked over warmly to greet her. "Cecilia, you're back. I cooked today and have been waiting for you to eat." Then, noticing the bags she was carrying, she asked curiously, "What did you buy?" Cecilia shook her head without answering, went straight upstairs to put her things away, and then came out to find Yvonne. "I'll help you." The two of them worked together in the kitchen for a while before Ethan finally returned. The villa was not filled with the arguments or mutual ignorance he had expected. Instead, they seemed to be getting along quite harmoniously. Ethan couldn't help but be shocked by this scene. He knew about Cecilia's feelings for him. A child's emotions were always written plainly on her face. The old Cecilia would never have been able to get along with Yvonne like this. He was home, the meal was ready, and the three of them sat down at the dining table to eat. During the meal, Yvonne remained incredibly enthusiastic, constantly putting food on Cecilia's plate. "Cecilia, try this shrimp. It's especially fresh and tender. I made it just for you." Looking at the food piling up in her bowl, Cecilia hesitated. Although she currently had a physical form, she was, after all, already dead. When she made the deal with the King of Hell, he had told her that during these 7 days, she could remain in the mortal world but could no longer eat mortal food. Because of this, she hesitated, never taking a bite of the food Yvonne had given her. Seeing her refusal to eat, Ethan sensed Yvonne's embarrassment and shot Cecilia a warning glance. "Yvonne gave it to you. Eat it." His commanding tone rang in Cecilia's ears. She remained silent but still picked up her bowl and ate all the food in it. As the food went down her throat, a sharp pain assaulted her. Her stomach felt like it was on fire, an unbearable agony. Cecilia could no longer hold it in and rushed to the bathroom, vomiting everything she had eaten before feeling a little better. The sudden turn of events caused Yvonne's eyes to redden instantly. She looked at Ethan, her voice laced with grievance. "Does Cecilia not like me?" At these words, Ethan's expression, which had been relatively normal, immediately changed. He patted Yvonne's hand to soothe her. "How could she not like you? I'll go check on her." With that, he also got up and went to the bathroom. In the bathroom, after vomiting, Cecilia felt the pain in her stomach subside. She looked up at her pale face in the mirror and let out a soft breath. "It seems this really won't work," she thought. "Maybe I should just find an excuse to leave later." With this in mind, she turned and opened the bathroom door, only to see Ethan standing guard at the entrance, his face grim. Cecilia froze. She thought he had come to check on her, so after a moment's thought, she spoke up. "Uncle, I'm not feeling well. You two go ahead and eat. I'm going back to my room." She assumed that after she said this, he would go back to accompany Yvonne, but she didn't expect his expression to darken even more. Suddenly, he spoke, his words leaving her completely stunned. When I came back, I saw you and Yvonne getting along so well. I thought you had finally learned your lesson. I didn't expect you to be so stubborn, still deliberately throwing a tantrum to embarrass Yvonne. Uncle, I wasn't. Her face grew even paler, and an uncontrollable ache began to throb in her heart. She forced a smile, wanting to explain, but before she could finish, he cut her off mercilessly. I don't care what your reason is. You will finish this meal properly. Chapter 3. After speaking, he dragged Cecilia back to the dining table and pushed her into a chair before returning to Yvonne's side. She looked up, first glancing at Ethan. He was busy comforting Yvonne. Sensing her gaze, he turned and shot her another warning look. Cecilia suppressed the bitterness in her heart, picked up her bowl, and forced herself to eat every last bite, enduring the pain. She kept her head down, tears dripping into the bowl. She lifted a mouthful of food to her lips, and the burning sensation traveled down her throat, mixed with the salty wetness of her tears. For a moment, she couldn't tell which hurt more, her stomach or her heart. The meal finally ended amidst Cecilia's silence and the intimacy between Ethan and Yvonne. Just as she put down her utensils, the sound of a car was heard from outside. That must be my things arriving, Yvonne said with a smile. She ran towards the door, while Ethan turned to Cecilia. Starting today, Yvonne will be moving in with us. He stared at her expression, searching for any crack in her composure, as if expecting her to burst into a tantrum and forbid Yvonne from moving in. But after her tears, Cecilia had already composed herself. She nodded calmly. I know. Seeing her so calm, Ethan felt a strange sense of unease. A peculiar feeling spread from the bottom of his heart. Just then, Yvonne walked over and naturally took his arm. Ethan, which room will I be staying in? Seeing her return, Ethan shook off the strange feeling and smiled at her dotingly. I'll show you. You can have any room you want. The three of them went upstairs to help Yvonne choose a room. After asking where Ethan's room was, she headed directly for the bedroom next to his. Watching the direction she was headed, a sense of foreboding rose in Cecilia's heart. She quickly followed. As she entered the room, she saw Yvonne survey the space and walk straight towards the wardrobe. Ethan, I think this room is quite nice. I'll take this one. Seeing Yvonne's hand reach for the wardrobe door, Cecilia forgot everything else and rushed forward to stop her. No, this is my room. You can't have it. Seeing Cecilia's intense reaction, Ethan frowned instinctively, his voice sharp with reprimand. What's with this reckless behavior? If Yvonne likes this room, just let her have it. I'll have the maid clean up another room for you. But no matter what he said, Cecilia stood with her back against the wardrobe, refusing to budge. Seeing her so stubborn, Ethan suppressed his anger and said, I see I've spoiled you rotten. They were at a stalemate. Finally, Yvonne stepped in to smooth things over. All right, Ethan, since Cecilia doesn't want to give it up, I'll just pick another one. Ethan looked at Cecilia, still stubbornly guarding the wardrobe, and finally laughed out of anger. He said deliberately, Fine, since she won't give it up, then you'll stay in my room. Hearing this, Yvonne buried her face in his chest, blushing with shyness. After saying this, Ethan led her out of the room. As they left, Cecilia vaguely saw Yvonne lift her hand, look at it, and ask with some confusion, Strange, why is there blood on my hand? I'm not hurt. After leaving the room, Ethan had someone move Yvonne's belongings into his room. The maids moved back and forth with the luggage, but Cecilia paid them no mind. The first thing she did was close the wardrobe doors with trembling hands. Only Cecilia knew where the blood on Yvonne's hand came from. It was because she had touched the wardrobe, and inside the wardrobe was Cecilia's body. Cecilia first locked the door, then found a roll of tape in the room and sealed the wardrobe tightly. The King of Hell had said that if her body was discovered early, she would have to disappear early. After securing everything, Cecilia finally felt relieved and went to the living room to pour a glass of water. As she passed Ethan's room, she saw through the slightly ajar door that he was inside, kissing Yvonne. She closed her eyes, turned her gaze away, and walked straight to the calendar, tearing off another countdown page and crumbling it in her hand. Chapter 4. The next day, Cecilia woke up early. When she went to the dining room, she saw that someone was already in the kitchen. It was Ethan, wearing an apron and cooking, with Yvonne hugging him from behind. He didn't resist, even turning back from time to look at her with a doting smile. Their intimate scene unfolded clearly before Cecilia's eyes, and she was suddenly reminded of the past. Back then, there were many maids in the house, but he was always busy with work, often not coming home all night. The maids saw she was just a child and easy to bully, so they would slack off and often not give her food. Later, he discovered their negligence, dismissed all the maids, and learned to cook to take care of her. He handled all 3 of her meals a day, down to the smallest detail. But now, she couldn't love him anymore. If Yvonne was the one who could bring him happiness, she would only offer them her blessing. Cecilia silently looked away and, without realizing it, walked back to the calendar. Yvonne had come out at some point and saw the calendar in front of her. She suddenly asked, "What is this countdown calendar for? Why are there only 7 pages?" Hearing Yvonne's question, Ethan also looked over and saw the calendar. Seeing that their attention was now focused on it, Cecilia thought for a moment and casually came up with a reason. "I saw this calendar when I was out with friends a few days ago. I thought it was interesting, so I bought it." The excuse was flimsy, but Ethan didn't press the matter. He brought up something else. "I'm going on a date with Yvonne today." He said it plainly, expecting her to make a scene, but to his surprise, she just nodded obediently. "Have a good time." Not getting the expected reaction, Ethan should have been happy, but looking at Cecilia now, he felt a strange heaviness in his heart. The atmosphere suddenly became quiet. Just then, Yvonne spoke up. "You don't have anything to do at home alone. Why don't you come with us?" Surprised by the sudden invitation, Cecilia froze for a moment, but then shook her head. "I have other plans. I've arranged to say goodbye to some friends today, so I won't be joining you." With only half a month left before university started, at the gathering, her friends were full of aspirations for the future. Only Cecilia sat alone on the side, silent. After all, she only had 5 days left. After 5 days, her soul would scatter. What future did she have? Just then, someone noticed her silence and came over. "Cease, don't you have a crush on your uncle? What about it? Are you thinking of winning him over before the holiday ends?" "Yeah, Cease, they say it's hard for a man to pursue a woman, but easy for a woman to pursue a man. You're not related by blood anyway, so don't be shy, just go for it." At the mention of this, everyone got excited and started giving her advice, some even encouraging her to just sleep with him. But Cecilia shook her head at them. "No, I won't and I can't love him anymore." The gathering didn't last long. As they were leaving, Cecilia said goodbye to each of them individually. "Jenna, congratulations on getting into your dream school. I'm sure you'll have a bright future. Mia, you're not in the best health and you always forget to eat breakfast. You have to take good care of yourself from now on. Amy, Susie, I'll miss you all." She hugged each one of them, her expression serious and solemn, so formal that the others laughed. "Cease, your farewell is so formal. It's like we'll never see each other again. Don't worry, even if we're not at the same university, we won't forget you." After saying their goodbyes, they left one by one. Cecilia was the last to leave. She watched their retreating figures, a trace of sadness rising in her heart. From now on, they would never meet again. "Goodbye, my friends." When Cecilia got home, Ethan had already returned. As she entered, she saw him sitting on the sofa, his face dark. She glanced around but didn't see Yvonne. She asked casually, "Where's Sister Yvonne?" "She's away on a business trip." Hearing his answer, she didn't think much of it and nodded, ready to leave. But just then, Ethan pulled out a pile of things and called out to her with a cold face. "Stop, what is the meaning of this urn and these burial clothes?" Chapter 5, seeing the pile of things on the floor, Cecilia's heart pounded violently. She had hidden them so well, she didn't know how Ethan had found them. She looked flustered for a moment before she seemed to remember something and stammered out an explanation. "Tomorrow is the anniversary of my parents' death. These are for them. I'm going to burn them as an offering." Hearing her answer, the strange feeling in Ethan's heart subsided. He paused, then said, "I'll go with you to see them tomorrow." "There's no need, Uncle. You should focus on keeping Sister Yvonne company and your work. I've caused you a lot of trouble in the past and been a burden. That won't happen anymore." Ethan had been prepared for her to be happy, but he didn't expect to see her shake her head and refuse his offer. His eyes were filled with surprise, but Cecilia had already turned and left. She silently tore another page from the calendar and threw the shredded pieces into the trash. Only 4 days left. Watching Cecilia's retreating back, Ethan thought of what she had just said and subconsciously replied, "You were never a burden to me." His voice was very soft, and Cecilia, already back in her room, naturally didn't hear it. With only 4 days left on the countdown, Cecilia went to her parents' cemetery alone. She walked to their graves and placed a bouquet of flowers before them. Her gaze fell on the photos on their headstones, their faces still familiar with gentle smiles from her memory. She sat down between the two graves, just as she used to sit between her parents. "Dad, Mom, I don't know if you've been reincarnated yet. Please don't blame me for being selfish, for trading my soul's existence for these 7 days. I used to be so envious of others who had loving parents while I had none. But later, I stopped being envious because I had Uncle. He cherished me, was good to me, and gave me all his love. So, I committed the great sin of falling in love with him. But now I realize that my existence is a burden to him. He will have a new family. So, from the beginning to the end, only Cease is alone. This world isn't so great after all, so I won't be coming back in the next life. I don't regret this decision. I only regret that before I died, I was never truly loved." Cecilia talked to Mr. and Mrs. Payne in the cemetery for a long time. When she was done, she didn't leave right away, but went to find the cemetery administrator. After consulting with the staff, Cecilia bought a burial plot for herself next to her parents. This way, she would be buried next to them, giving her a sense of belonging. After leaving the cemetery, she sold the inheritance her parents had left her and all the gifts Ethan had ever given her, converting them into a considerable sum of money. She would give all this money back to Ethan as repayment for the 10 years he had spent raising her. Cecilia transferred all the money onto a bank card. By the time she returned to the villa, it was very late. This time, Ethan wasn't home, which made things convenient for her. She took the card and quietly went into the study, hiding the card in a desk drawer. As she was about to leave, she noticed the study was a bit messy, probably because he had just finished work and hadn't had time to tidy up. She sighed, looked at the files, and carefully organized the study for him. While cleaning, Cecilia accidentally pulled open a drawer. Just as she was about to close it, her eyes fell on its contents, and she froze. Inside the drawer was a thick stack of love letters. Cecilia's breath caught the moment she saw them. She couldn't help but reach out and pick them up, a wave of astonishment washing over her. Could Uncle have written these love letters? Uncle actually writes love letters. Who are they for? One question after another popped into her head, her thoughts a tangled mess. Lost in her thoughts, Ethan walked in at that very moment. He saw the love letters in Cecilia's hand at a glance, and his face changed instantly. He spoke sharply, his voice tinged with a slight tremor of panic. "Who told you could go through my things?" Chapter 6. Hearing Ethan's sharp question, Cecilia finally snapped back to reality. Seeing the love letters in her hand, she quickly put the envelopes back in the drawer and stammered an explanation. "I just wanted to help you clean up." But her explanation didn't earn his understanding. Instead, his voice grew even colder. "Did you read what was inside?" Cecilia was stunned. She hadn't expected that to be his main concern. Seeing his face grow darker, she quickly shook her head and replied, "No, I didn't." Hearing this, Ethan's expression finally softened a bit, but when he looked at her, his voice was still laced with anger. "You can leave now, and don't touch my things again without my permission." "I'm sorry." "I won't." Cecilia lowered her head, didn't argue, and left the study. After leaving the study, she went straight back to her room. Lying in bed, her mind couldn't help but drift to the love letters she had seen in the study. She had never heard of Ethan having someone he liked. As long as she could remember, she had never seen any woman by his side other than herself and Yvonne. Who could those love letters be for? Could they be for her? As her thoughts swirled, Cecilia gradually fell asleep. When she woke up again, it was the middle of the night. Vaguely, she heard voices from the next room. Yvonne was back. Cecilia instantly became alert and moved closer to the door. From here, she was very close to them, and since they hadn't closed their door, she could hear their voices clearly. The first person to speak was Yvonne, her voice full of surprise and joy. "I was only away on business for 2 days, and you wrote me so many love letters." As soon as she finished speaking, Ethan's smiling reply followed, his voice gentle and doting, just like the tone he used to use with Cecilia before her confession. "What, you don't like them?" Yvonne didn't hide her happiness, planting a kiss on his cheek. "I love them. You have to write them for me every day from now on." As the last reply faded, ambiguous, intimate sounds came from the next room. When the sound of the bedroom door closing was heard, Cecilia scrambled away from the doorway. She lay back in bed and closed her eyes, her face turning pale. For a moment, she felt utterly ridiculous and pitiful. "Cecilia, what on earth are you thinking?" In truth, when she first saw the panic on Ethan's face, a ridiculous thought had crossed her mind, that those love letters were for her. But it wasn't until she heard the conversation between Ethan and Yvonne that she finally realized just how laughable her thought had been. With only 3 days left on the countdown, it was Yvonne's birthday. Ethan spent a fortune to throw her a grand birthday party. Many people came because this was more than just a simple birthday celebration. At the party, Ethan dropped another major piece of news soon. He and Yvonne would be holding their engagement party. As everyone crowded around to congratulate them, Cecilia stood there in a daze. Did Uncle love Yvonne this much? In just 3 short months, he had already decided to get engaged to her. She gave a bitter smile, looking at the gift in her hands. She hadn't expected that this gift, originally intended as a final farewell to him, would become a congratulatory gift for his engagement. Watching the other gift givers gradually disperse, she walked up to Ethan with her gift. Although she had already made up her mind that as long as Uncle was happy, she would bless him no matter who he chose. At this moment, saying those words of blessing out loud was still so painfully difficult. "Uncle, congratulations in advance on your engagement. May you grow old together." Chapter 7. Ethan looked at her, took the gift she offered, his expression unreadable. It's not too late to give your blessings at the engagement party. The engagement party. But she wouldn't last until his engagement. Cecilia lowered her head in silence, offering no explanation or rebuttal. After handing over the gift, she left and found a corner to sit down in. She left, but Ethan didn't pay much attention. He continued to mingle with Yvonne on his arm, a gentle smile on his face, patiently introducing Yvonne to every well-wisher. Before long, after greeting all the guests, Ethan and Yvonne disappeared from the crowd. Cecilia sat alone for a while, then got up and left the banquet hall. She really wasn't used to such occasions. She had never liked crowded places. In the past, Ethan would always sneak her away midway through. Now, his habit hadn't changed. The only thing that had changed was the person he took with him. The space outside the banquet hall was large. Cecilia remembered a flower hall nearby and walked towards it, but before she got close, she saw that someone was already there. As she got closer, she saw it was Ethan and Yvonne, who had left early. "Ethan, after we get married, I want a flower hall just for me. Can I?" Yvonne's slightly coquettish voice reached her ears. Soon after, Ethan's response came, full of doting affection. "Why wait until after we're married? I can give it to you now." "Really?" Yvonne's eyes were filled with surprise. Blushing, she leaned in to plant a kiss on his cheek. He turned his head, and the kiss that was meant for his cheek landed on his lips. The unexpected move made her already flushed face even redder. As she hastily tried to pull back, he wrapped his arm around her and deepened the kiss. Not far away, Cecilia took it all in. Perhaps it was because she was already dead. Perhaps it was because she had already prepared herself to bless them. Witnessing this, she didn't feel the pain she had imagined. Instead, there was an unprecedented sense of calm. She didn't disturb them. She turned and walked away. She wandered aimlessly and, without realizing it, found herself near the swimming pool. Cecilia stood there blankly, staring at the clear water in the pool. After an unknown amount of time, a familiar voice sounded in her ear. "This scene must be hard for you to watch, right?" She turned to see it was Yvonne. Cecilia was confused, not understanding what she meant. "Ethan told me everything. You have those kinds of feelings for him. To be honest, you're just a young girl, and Ethan is so outstanding. It's normal to have such feelings." She spoke words of understanding, but her eyes were filled with malice. But then again, it's not normal. After all, what normal child falls in love with her own uncle? Cecilia hadn't expected Ethan to tell Yvonne everything without hiding any of her feelings. An unspeakable sense of shame washed over her. He could reject her, and that was fine. She was already dead and had decided to bless them. But why did he have to trample on her feelings like this? She remained silent, but Yvonne's voice didn't stop, even taking on a slight tone of showing off. "Ethan doesn't like you, and I don't have time to play this family drama with you. I'll be marrying into the Shaw family soon, and I don't want a child constantly coming between us." If you're willing to leave, I can give you a sum of money. You're an adult now. It's time you learn to be independent." At these words, Cecilia's face instantly turned pale. After a long silence, she finally replied in a hoarse voice, "Don't worry. In 3 days, I will leave." Cecilia's concession did not soften Yvonne's attitude. Instead, she pressed on even more aggressively. "Why 3 days? Why not now?" Cecilia was at a loss for words, not knowing how to explain it to her. In 3 days, it wasn't the day she would leave the Shaw house, but the day she would leave this world for good. Chapter 8. Just as she was about to speak, an accident happened. 2 children on skateboards were roughhousing and heading towards the pool. They didn't see the people standing in front of them and couldn't brake in time, instantly pushing Yvonne into the water. With a loud splash, a huge spray of water erupted from the pool. Cecilia froze for a second, then snapped back to reality. Without a thought for the 2 troublemaking children, she was about to jump in to save Yvonne when a figure rushed past her. A powerful force hit her, and Cecilia staggered back 2 steps. Once she regained her balance, she saw that the person who had rushed over was Ethan. Without hesitation, he threw off his jacket and jumped into the pool. After pulling Yvonne to safety, he frowned at Cecilia. "What happened?" Before she could explain, Yvonne, wrapped in his jacket, suddenly spoke up. "It's all my fault. I made Cecilia angry, that's why she pushed me into the water. Fortunately, I'm fine, so don't blame her." Her weak, pitiful voice, combined with her trembling, was on full display for everyone to see. And after hearing her explanation, which was more of an accusation than a defense, his blaming gaze fell upon Cecilia. "I didn't push her. It wasn't me, it was." She shook her head, trying to defend herself. She turned to look for the 2 troublemaking kids, but after scanning the area, they were nowhere to be seen. In an instant, Cecilia was speechless. That hesitation cost her the chance to explain. "If it wasn't you, then who was it, me? Or are you trying to say she fell in by herself?" "Cecilia Payne, I thought you were just a bit headstrong. Now I see you're simply ill-mannered." It was like a clap of thunder, exploding in her mind. Did Uncle just say that? That she was ill-mannered? He knew perfectly well that after her parents died, that was the one thing she feared hearing the most. The kids at school who bullied her loved to say she had a mother but no one to raise her. Back then, he was the one who stood up for her. But now, he was the one who personally turned those words into a blade and stabbed her with it. Her lips trembled as she tried to say something more, but he didn't linger. He picked up Yvonne and walked away. With the main characters gone, there was no reason for the party to continue. The crowd dispersed, and Cecilia returned home alone, utterly dejected. She didn't sleep well all night. She called him and sent him messages, trying to explain, but a whole night passed, and Ethan didn't respond. It wasn't until the faint light of dawn the next day that he finally returned to the villa with Yvonne. "Uncle, I really didn't push her. There were 2 kids playing around who accidentally pushed her, and seeing them return." Cecilia rushed forward to explain, but he remained silent, pulling Yvonne past her without even a glance. She quickened her steps to block his path again, her eyes reddening as she spoke. "Can't you just believe me this once? You used to. You used to believe me so much." At the sound of her choked voice, he finally paused. In the past, Ethan was the only family Cecilia had. He alone had given her everything she needed. Whenever something happened, he would unconditionally believe what she said. She had once asked him why he still believed her when everyone else said she was lying. At that time, he had said, "Cease, I raised you myself. I may not know other people's character, but don't I know what kind of person you are?" But now, he stood there in silence for a long time before finally reaching out and pushing Cecilia away. "Move!" He didn't use much force, but she staggered and fell to the ground. Seeing how easily she was pushed over, Ethan panicked and rushed to help her up. But the moment he touched her, he felt an unnatural coldness. "Why is your body temperature so low?" His voice was filled with unconcealable worry. Seeing Cecilia stammer, unable to give a reason, he grabbed her hand, only to discover with astonishment that he couldn't even find her pulse just as he was about to ask. Yvonne, who had been standing behind Ethan, interrupted him. "Cecilia, even if you're upset that Ethan is with me, you shouldn't pretend to be sick to make him worry about you." At these words, all the worry in Ethan's heart turned to anger. "Wasn't pushing Yvonne into the pool enough for you? Now you have to fake an illness to get my attention?" The only way you can get my forgiveness now is to apologize to Yvonne. The hands-on-the-wall clock continued to tick by, second by second. An unspeakable sorrow filled her heart. Her time was already running out. Did she have to waste it on a cold war? Cecilia, her face pale, didn't try to explain further. Fine, I'll apologize. With that, she stood up, lowered her head, and with red-rimmed eyes, said she was sorry to Yvonne. Then she looked up at Ethan again. This time, her eyes were like stagnant pools of dead water. Uncle, can you forgive me now? Having gotten the apology he wanted, Ethan felt no better. Because the girl in front of him looked as if she had been deeply wronged, so sad she looked like she could burst into tears at any moment. His face was extremely grim. After a long pause, he coldly threw out 4 words, "Don't let it happen again." Chapter 9. On the last day of the countdown, when Cecilia came downstairs, Ethan and Yvonne were getting ready to leave. Just as they reached the door, she called out to him. "Uncle, I know you're busy, but can you come back and have a meal with me today? Just one meal, just the 2 of us. I want to say a proper goodbye to you." Her eyes were filled with reluctance and hope, but the first thing he thought when he heard her words was that this was just another one of her confessions. He was about to refuse, but Yvonne patted his hand and said understandingly, "Then I'll go hang out with my girlfriends. It's been a while since I've seen them. You're the elder, after all. Don't always bicker with a child like her." In the end, with her persuasion, Ethan agreed. Even though she got the answer she wanted, the sourness in Cecilia's heart surged uncontrollably. She watched the 2 of them get into the car, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. Cecilia suppressed the churning emotions in her heart and turned back into the house. She had heard that when people die, their belongings should be burned. Today was the last day, and she didn't want to trouble her uncle, so she took the initiative to gather her things and burn them. Her room was filled with too many traces of Ethan. From her toiletries to the clothes she wore, everything had been handled by Ethan. In the beginning, he wasn't so meticulous in caring for someone. Most of the time, her daily needs were left to the nanny and his assistant. It wasn't until later, when the nanny was found to be skimping on her food and the assistant, juggling work between the villa and the office, inevitably had some oversights. One day, she caught a cold and developed a fever that no one noticed. If Ethan hadn't happened to have some free time to come home and check on her, discovering Cecilia burning up and red all over, she might have really, as the doctor said, suffered brain damage from the fever. From then on, he never let anyone else handle her affairs. Her thoughts returned from her memories. Looking at the ashes of what was once her belongings, she couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. From now on, she would no longer exist in this world. She cleaned the house until it was spotless, leaving only the wardrobe sealed with tape. She wondered what Ethan's reaction would be when he saw her body. Would he be sad? Without her as a burden, with no one clinging to him and saying things he didn't want to hear, surely, Uncle would be happy. After tidying up the house, Cecilia began to prepare for her last meal with Ethan. She wasn't a very good cook. In the past, he would either take her out to eat or cook himself. Cecilia had once offered to learn to cook, saying she wanted to make him a meal. But after she was burned by hot oil once, he never allowed her to learn again. Later, she secretly learned to cook, wanting to surprise him, but before she could fully master it, the accident happened, and she became a wandering soul. But thankfully, she could no longer be burned by hot oil. Cecilia spent a full 5 hours making a sumptuous meal. She sat at the dining table waiting for a long time. The food grew cold, was reheated, and grew cold again, but he never came back. She sent Ethan a message. He didn't reply. She also called him, but 1 call, 2 calls, there was no answer. After the call disconnected automatically again, Cecilia stared blankly at her phone. Suddenly, a social media post appeared on her feed. It was from Yvonne. A bad feeling rose in her heart, but her hand uncontrollably clicked on the post. The photo showed 2 plane tickets, and the caption read, "Love is when I say I want to see the snow in Switzerland, and he drops everything to go with me." The moment she saw the post, her face turned white. With trembling hands, she found Ethan's number and called again. This time, the call finally connected. "Did you go to Switzerland with her? You promised me you would." Before she could finish, she was interrupted by a female voice on the other end. Only then did Cecilia realize that the person who answered the phone was Yvonne. "Cecilia Payne, did you really think Ethan would come back to be with you?" Stop dreaming. The best thing you can do now is pack your things and get out of Ethan's villa." With that, she hung up without waiting for Cecilia's reply. The dial tone droned on for a long time. Cecilia sat in silence for a long time. When the clock struck 12, she had just thrown all the food from the table into the trash when the voice of the King of Hell sounded from above. "Cecilia Payne, the 7-day period is up. Do you regret making this deal with me?" The gloomy, chilling voice echoed through the villa. As it faded away, Cecilia gave a bitter smile, her voice faint. "I have my regrets, but I don't regret my choice." She stood up, walked to the calendar, and tore off the last countdown page. "Let me go." As the words fell, Cecilia watched her own body gradually become transparent. She raised her hand in front of her face, watching her already transparent soul dissipate from her fingertips, then her hands and legs, and then her body. Finally, she vanished completely. Before she disappeared, she looked into the distance and smiled. "Uncle, goodbye. Goodbye forever." Chapter 10, 5 days later, Ethan returned from Switzerland and immediately sensed something was wrong with the villa. There was no Cecilia, excitedly greeting him at the door as usual. He changed his shoes and walked into the living room, but there was only one feeling. It was too quiet. He suddenly remembered that Cecilia had been unusually quiet these past 5 days, with no calls or messages. "Where's Cecilia? She can't still be angry that you didn't show up for your appointment the other day, can she? But you had to stand her up for work, didn't you? She's just being childish. You can coax her a bit later." Yvonne's voice came from behind, and her words ignited the anger in his heart. "Childish? She's about to go to university, and she's still throwing a childish tantrum? This time, I'm going to give her the cold shoulder. No one is to talk to her. We'll see when she decides to come out." Hearing his angry words, Yvonne hid the schadenfreude in her eyes and pretended to comfort him for a few moments before returning to her room. "Let them have their standoff," she thought. "The longer they're not speaking, the happier I am." Ethan didn't go straight to the bedroom or the study. Instead, he went to the dining room. As he approached, he smelled a foul odor. He frowned and scanned the room, his eyes locking on the trash can swarming with flies. After a moment's thought, he understood, but then anger surged. It was just one meal. Does she have to be so dramatic, leaving the trash here to make a point? He instinctively wanted to go upstairs, but a casual glance caught sight of a phone left on a chair. He picked it up and turned it on. The screen showed a girl with a joyful smile, but the background was dominated by Ethan, who was working. It was a candid photo. He had seen it the day she took it. She had been using it as her wallpaper all this time. He couldn't quite put a name to the emotion he was feeling. He didn't unlock the phone, just turned off the screen, took out his own phone to call someone to dispose of the stinking garbage, and then went straight upstairs. Cecilia's room wasn't locked. Ethan pushed the door open gently. He walked in, and what greeted him was an empty room, except for a wardrobe sealed with tape. The gifts he had given her, the things she had received with such excitement, promising to always display them in the most prominent places, were all gone. For some reason, at that moment, he felt his own heart become empty. But in the next instant, he sensed something was wrong. Cecilia wasn't here. All her things were gone. She hadn't even taken her phone. It wasn't time for school to start yet, but she had suddenly disappeared without a word. This was something that would never have happened before. He instinctively took out his phone and dialed his assistant. "Help me find out where Cecilia Payne has gone." After hanging up, Ethan's gaze was involuntarily drawn to the wardrobe, which reeked of abnormality, bound with tape. He walked towards it, a sense of unease suddenly welling up inside him. He reached out and tore off the tape. Just as he was about to open the wardrobe, the piercing ring of his phone shattered the silence of the room. He answered the call. It was his assistant's panicked voice. "Mr. Shaw, it's bad. Miss Payne has canceled all her personal identification records." The clerk who handled it said that when Miss Payne was processing the cancellation, she mentioned something about disappearing from this world in 6 days. With a thud, the phone fell to the floor. Ethan felt his heart skip a beat, a buzzing sound exploding in his ears. It felt as if he had heard something unbelievable. They must be conspiring to trick him. How could Cecilia disappear from this world? She was only 18, in the prime of her youth, with a bright future ahead of her. How could that be possible? Chapter 11, he looked up dazedly at the wardrobe, which was now right in front of him, but suddenly he lacked the courage to open it. His racing heart, which beat faster the closer he got, told him that something he couldn't accept was hidden inside. Ethan raised a trembling hand, but he still couldn't bring himself to open the wardrobe. Just then, Yvonne walked in. Seeing him standing motionless in front of the wardrobe, she was puzzled. "Ethan, what's wrong? I heard a noise over here and came to check." She looked around the empty room and, not seeing the person she expected, a thought crept into her mind. Could it be that Cecilia was sensible enough to move out on her own? Ethan didn't answer Yvonne. He just stood there, motionless, in front of the wardrobe. Seeing him like this, Yvonne's gaze also fell on the wardrobe. Without much thought, she reached out and opened it. The next moment, a scream tore from her throat. Her scream brought Ethan back to his senses, but the moment he saw the scene before him, his heart slammed in his chest. Inside the wardrobe was Cecilia, her eyes closed, her body covered in blood. The body, which had retained its appearance at the time of death, began to rapidly decay upon contact with the air. Faint purple livor mortis was visible, and the foul stench of death filled the air. And Ethan, the moment he saw the body, his eyes turned red. "Cease," his voice was thick with an uncontrollable tremor. The man who had never cried in front of others finally lost his composure. How could this be? He carefully lifted the body out of the wardrobe. Seeing this, Yvonne, her legs weak with fear, stumbled out of the room. Once outside, she fumbled for her phone and dialed the police. The police and the medical examiner arrived at the villa quickly. By then, Yvonne had calmed down slightly. When the doorbell rang, she hurried to let them in. Yvonne only led them to the door of the room, refusing to take another step inside. The police and the medical examiner entered on their own. As soon as they entered the room, they saw Ethan, tightly holding the decomposing body in his arms. It took a lot of persuasion from everyone to finally convince him to let go of the body and cooperate with their investigation. The body was quickly taken away. As everyone was leaving the villa, an older police officer looked at the distraught Ethan, sighed, and patted his shoulder comfortingly. "My condolences. I'm sure your family member wouldn't want to see you so heartbroken. The dead are gone, but the living must move on." With that, he turned and hurried to catch up with his team, leaving Ethan to stare at their retreating backs, his mind a complete blank. Move on? Where could he possibly move on to? He had only meant to sever her feelings for him, so he had deliberately been cold to Cecilia. He had only been gone for 5 days. How had it turned into? A final farewell? An overwhelming wave of grief engulfed him. He covered his face with his hands, and finally, he couldn't hold it in any longer. A suppressed sob escaped through his fingers. A long time later, he spoke to Yvonne in a hoarse voice. "You should go." The words hung in the air. Yvonne, who had been hiding in her room, was stunned. Seeing he wasn't joking, she rushed downstairs and threw herself at his feet. "Ethan, her death has nothing to do with me. I really love you. How can you send me away?" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clung to his leg. But this time, he didn't gently help her up as he used to. Instead, he pried her fingers off one by one. "Yvonne Vance, I told you from the very beginning that I was only looking for you to pretend to be my fiancé. Now, I don't need a fake fiancé anymore." His voice was filled with exhaustion. After a long pause, he gave a bitter laugh and distanced himself from her. "I'll give you the money I promised, not a penny less. Take the money and go." Chapter 12. Yvonne didn't want to leave, but in the end, she couldn't win against Ethan. She accepted the compensation he offered and bought a plane ticket to go abroad. On the day Cecilia's autopsy report came out, Ethan was stunned when he saw the time of death. 16 days ago. But he had seen Cecilia just a week ago. He voiced his confusion, and the official was also taken aback for a moment, but then replied with certainty. "Mr. Shaw, the autopsy was performed by the most authoritative medical examiner in our bureau. His report is absolutely correct." Walking out of the police station, Ethan felt as if even his steps were hollow. How could it be possible? A person who was already dead had lived with him for a whole week. He didn't believe it. He remembered the abnormally rapid decomposition of the body when he found it. A thought suddenly rose in his mind. Was the body not Cecilia's, or had Cecilia already died, but for some reason her spirit had remained in this world? Once this thought appeared, all the abnormalities he had noticed before resurfaced in his mind. From 16 days ago, when Cecilia suddenly called him many times, saying she needed him for something, only to be found sitting perfectly fine on the living room sofa, to the sudden appearance of the 7-page countdown calendar on the wall. The day the last page was torn off was the last day he ever received any news from Cecilia. And then, the day he accidentally pushed her down. When he rushed to help her up, he was shocked to find her body was ice cold and he couldn't find a pulse. It seemed all the clues were pointing to the second possibility. As if he had realized something, he frantically searched for evidence to verify this. But in the end, he found that everyone else's memories of Cecilia during those 7 days seemed to have been erased by some invisible force. Ethan intercepted Yvonne just before she boarded her flight and asked her about Cecilia. But the answer he got was, "Cecilia? I only met her once at the very beginning and then the day her body was found." Then she added, trying to plead her case, "Ethan, I really like you. Can't you give me a chance?" He asked every guest who had attended Yvonne's birthday party. Logically, the incident with the drowning should have left a deep impression on them, especially concerning Cecilia, one of the people involved. But strangely, everyone he asked either inquired about his engagement to Yvonne or, when he brought up Cecilia, simply said, "The girl who lives with you? I haven't heard from her in a long time." The birthday party. I didn't see her there. Even the clerk his assistant had contacted, who had helped Cecilia to register, said he had indeed seen her. But that was 22 days ago. All his efforts were in vain. Ethan walked back home. When he reached the villa, he looked at the familiar furnishings with a sense of bewilderment. Why was everyone's memory different from his? Why was he the only one who remembered Cecilia's extra 7 days? He took out his phone and suddenly remembered that Cecilia's phone was still with him. In an instant, it was as if the fog in front of him had cleared. Ethan was ecstatic. "That's right, maybe, there's a clue on her phone." He rushed upstairs to the study and took out the phone from the drawer. The familiar smile lit up the screen, but to him, it felt like a century had passed. Cecilia's phone password hadn't changed. It was his birthday. Ethan quickly unlocked it. He first checked the call history and messages. The screen was filled with his number. The most recent date was 9 days ago, the day he had promised to have dinner with her. If only he had known. If only he hadn't stood her up for work. That day was their last meeting. Surprisingly, he had never answered Cecilia's calls, but 16 days ago and 9 days ago, there were 2 connected calls. And the only person who could have had his phone on those 2 days was Yvonne. Chapter 13, he opened the messaging app and was shocked to find unexpected evidence. It was a chat history between Yvonne and Cecilia, and a social media post from Yvonne 9 days ago, visible only to Cecilia. The provocative words made Ethan's eyes turn red. He had never asked Yvonne to do any of these things. He took screenshots of everything and sent them to Yvonne, adding a final question. "You said you only saw her twice and had no other contact. Then what is this?" Yvonne didn't reply, probably because she was still on the plane. A long time later, a message finally came back. She sent him a video. In the video, she opened the images he had sent one by one, but they were all blank. "There's nothing here." Looking at the blank screenshots in the video, Ethan was stunned for a moment. In disbelief, he forwarded them again, but the result was the same, a blank screen. He tried many different methods and finally came to a conclusion. Only he could remember and see the events of Cecilia's extra 7 days. A sense of powerlessness washed over him. How could this be? How could he be the only one who remembered? Ethan Shaw went mad. Everyone knew it. He tried again and again, desperately trying to prove that a dead person had a phantom 7 days. He only regained a brief moment of sanity when he learned that Cecilia's killer had been caught. He hired the best lawyer, determined to see the murderer receive the harshest punishment. After that, he never recovered. Mr. and Mrs. Shaw's hair turned white with worry. They eventually chose a new heir and gave up on him completely. Until one day, still worried about the crazed Ethan, they went to his villa to check on him. They searched the entire house and finally found him in the master bathroom. He was lying in a full bathtub, his eyes closed, a smile on his lips. A deep, bone-visible wound on his wrist was still dripping blood, staining the entire tub red. Witnessing this scene, Mrs. Shaw couldn't hold it in any longer. She let out a scream and fainted. Only Mr. Shaw was left, his breathing ragged. his hands trembling as he reached for his phone to call for an ambulance, while also tentatively checking for a breath under his son's nose. Feeling no breath at all, Mr. Shaw's eyes instantly turned red. It wasn't until the ambulance arrived with a wail and everyone was loaded onto stretchers that the tears finally fell. Ethan Shaw could not be saved. Or rather, the moment he was lifted from the bathtub, the accompanying doctor had already confirmed his death. Upon hearing this news, Mrs. Shaw, who had just been revived, couldn't hold back her sobs and wept into her hands. At that moment, however, Ethan Shaw had already arrived in another place. He blinked his eyes open to a dim, gloomy world. He thought he was dreaming, but when he lifted his hand, he saw that it had become semi-transparent. Am I dead? Suddenly, when he saw the terrifyingly grim face of the King of Hell, the emotion in his eyes was not the fear the king expected, but joy. I knew it. His crazed demeanor left the King of Hell speechless for a moment. Seeing him stumble towards him, the king waved his hand and froze him in place. Ethan Shaw, your fate was not yet sealed. You should not have come here. A ghost who had taken his own life should not have been dealt with by the King of Hell. But now, his fate had been abruptly cut short due to the king's intervention, creating a karmic link that led to this meeting. The King of Hell was supposed to have erased Ethan's memory of Cecilia's last 7 days, but for some reason, his magic had failed. It was this failure that led him to discover that Ethan, after months of madness, had chosen to end his own life. Chapter 14. Your Excellency, I'm looking for someone. Ethan was frozen in place, unable to move, but he seemed not to hear the King of Hell's words, only intent on saying what he wanted to say. After a long pause, the King of Hell sighed. She has already dissipated. You should go to your reincarnation. These words struck him like a bolt of lightning. He stood there, stunned, not understanding what the King of Hell meant. Dissipated? What do you mean? Why would she dissipate? Ethan stood stubbornly before the King of Hell. Even though he was as insignificant as an ant before the king, he refused to move an inch. It wasn't until the King of Hell's icy voice rang out, "She once made a deal with me. In exchange for 7 days with you to resolve her regrets, she paid the price of her soul being scattered, never to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Now that the 7-day period is up, she has naturally dissipated." With every word the King of Hell spoke, Ethan's heart sank a little lower until it finally hit rock bottom. Cecilia traded her soul's existence for 7 days with him. Seeing Ethan's face gradually turn pale, the King of Hell suddenly waved his hand, and a misty mirror appeared, replaying events from the moment before Cecilia's death. As she lay dying from multiple stab wounds, he, in an attempt to make her give up on him, used the excuse of taking care of a feverish Yvonne to hang up on her desperate calls for help, one after another. In the end, it was Yvonne who, without his knowledge, answered one call not to hear her plea for help, but to extinguish her last glimmer of hope. "Cecilia, is something wrong? Ethan is cooking porridge for me right now. He doesn't have time to take your call." She took her last breath in despair. Her lingering obsession turned her into a ghost, unable to enter the underworld, wandering the human realm until she was discovered by the King of Hell, with whom she made a deal. A terrible deal. She traded her soul's existence for 7 days with him, but he, out of his own cowardice, could only push her away. Ethan saw Cecilia sell her parents' inheritance and his gifts, putting all the money on that card. He saw her discover the thick stack of love letters while tidying his study. He watched her being kicked out of the study, overhearing that the letters were for Yvonne, and crying secretly under the covers, calling herself a fool for thinking the letters were for her. But she hadn't been wrong. Those letters were indeed written for her. How ridiculous. Ethan Shaw loved Cecilia Payne, but he didn't dare to admit it. He feared the judgment of the world, and he feared that judgment would hurt Cecilia. So he pushed her away, even finding Yvonne to pretend to be his girlfriend, acting as if he loved Yvonne and shattering Cecilia's heart into pieces. Then, on the day of Yvonne's birthday party, she was clearly knocked into the pool by a couple of kids, and Yvonne had been the one spouting vicious words all along. But he had stood firmly on Yvonne's side. He believed she had pushed Yvonne into the pool, accused her of lying and trying to shirk responsibility. Even after discovering her abnormal body temperature and lack of a pulse, he had dismissed it as her faking an illness because of Yvonne's words. She had apologized, swallowing her grievances. He had seen the dead look in her eyes, and on that last day, he had promised to have a meal with her, just one meal, but he had stood her up again. He had thought that once she gave up on him, everything would be fine. Now he knew just how foolish he had been to have personally let the person he loved dissipate with such regret. She must have been in so much pain, so scared when she died, but he had hung up on her call for help, and yet she had still paid such a high price for him. Chapter 15, Your Excellency, I also want to make a deal. After a long silence, Ethan finally spoke, his words surprising even the King of Hell. A deal? What deal do you want to make? The King of Hell's eyes were full of interest, as if he was very intrigued by the deal he was proposing. Seeing that the King of Hell didn't immediately refuse, a flash of joy appeared in his eyes. He realized this wasn't impossible, and then he laid out his thoughts completely. I want to trade all my future lives for one last life with her. This was the only solution Ethan could think of after seeing Cecilia's deal with the King of Hell. But as soon as he finished speaking, the King of Hell laughed. She had to have her soul scattered with no future lives just for 7 days with you. What makes you think that all your future lives can be traded for a future life with her? The King of Hell shook his head, mocking his arrogance and ignorance. The price of changing fate was too high. How could he just trade for it as he wished? What's more, he wanted to bring back the life of someone whose soul had already been scattered. His words made Ethan feel ashamed, but it didn't take long for him to recover. If it wasn't enough, he would add more. As long as I can make the trade, as long as I have it, I'll give up anything. He spoke with such sincerity that the King of Hell gave him a second look. But in the end, the king still shook his head. Even so, it can only be traded for one more life for her. As for the relationship between you two, there's no guarantee. At these words, Ethan fell silent. A feeling of powerlessness welled up from the bottom of his heart. So even if he gave everything he had now, he couldn't get back what they once had? He let out a bitter laugh. The King of Hell was tired of his antics and interrupted him. Are you making the trade or not? Seeing him fall silent, the King of Hell thought he would back down and was about to wave for the guards to take him away, but he suddenly looked up straight at the king. I'll do it. He had wronged Cecilia. Now he had to repay everything he owed her. Even if they would have no connection from now on, so what? As long as he knew she was alive and well in this world, that was enough. The King of Hell remained high and mighty, his cold, emotionless voice ringing in his ears. Have you thought it through? He nodded, no longer hesitant, his reply firm and strong. I have. Then I will grant your wish. After you are reincarnated, you will forget your past. You cannot force your wishes or desires. As the voice faded, a cold, chilling wind blew past, sending a shiver down Ethan's spine. The next moment, he lost consciousness completely. An unknown amount of time passed. When he woke up again, he found himself in a completely different environment. In the dim light, only a sliver of brightness shone through a crack in the attic, hitting his eyes and making them sting. He instinctively squinted and blocked the light with his hand. He was covered with a thin, tattered blanket. He casually threw it off and, as he stood up, dust fell in clouds, the choking particles making him sneeze violently. Ethan Shaw stood up straight, but his head hit the ceiling with a bang. He rubbed his bruised head and looked around, only then realizing that the small attic was just barely tall enough for him to stand upright. He climbed down the wooden ladder and saw the dilapidated state of his home, frowning. For some reason, he had a feeling that his home shouldn't be like this. But on second thought, if not like this, what should it be like? He thought for a long time and came to a conclusion. He must have slept for too long and dreamed of something, which was why he had this feeling. Chapter 16, Today was Sunday. He attended a local university, so he had time to come home. Ethan Shaw came from a poor family. His parents, worn out from years of hard labor, had lost their ability to work by the time he was in high school. The family had no savings, but fortunately, he was very hardworking and managed to get scholarships and grants throughout his schooling, so he wasn't unable to afford his education. It was also because of his parents that he chose only the best university in the city when applying, not wanting to be too far away this way. He could make time to come home every week to be with his parents. He looked at the time. It was already 4 in the afternoon. As he came down from the attic, Mr. and Mrs. Shaw were putting the fruit he had brought back into his backpack. Hearing him come down, they quickened their pace. Seeing this, Ethan quickly went over to stop them, taking the fruit out again. He said with some exasperation, "Dad, Mom, I brought this fruit especially for you. I have grants at school, so I can afford to eat these things. You're not in good health, so don't always be so reluctant to eat, saving everything for me." Mr. Shaw tried to stuff the fruit back again, shaking his head in disagreement. "Don't think I don't know. Even with grants, if you give the fruit to us, you won't have any for yourself. Fruit is expensive. You're a student and you have to take care of us too. You need to eat well." "Dad, that's just an excuse. If you two keep pushing it back and forth, from now on I'll just drop things off and leave. I won't come to see you anymore." He firmly pushed all the fruit back one last time, picked up his bag, and pretended to be angry as he started to walk out. In the end, Mr. and Mrs. Shaw couldn't win against their son and accepted the fruit. When it was time to say goodbye, the couple reluctantly saw him to the door, wanting him to come back more often, but also not wanting him to come back too frequently. Mr. and Mrs. Shaw only had one child, Ethan, and they had poured all their love into him. Later, when they became a burden to their child, they felt guilty and blamed themselves. But Ethan was very sensible. While busy with his studies, he had been doing part-time jobs since high school. In the face of their guilt and self-blame, he would always say, "Dad, Mom, you raised me for so many years and made me so outstanding. How could you be a burden to me? You are the best parents. Just relax and accept the rewards from your precious son." Now he was in university, and he had even given up a better university for them. As parents, they naturally hoped their child could spend more time with them, but seeing him work so hard, they couldn't help but feel sorry for him and want him to think more about himself. As Ethan stepped out of the house, he thought for a moment, then turned back to remind them, "Mom, Dad, the fruit won't last long. Remember to eat it. Don't let it go bad because you're reluctant to eat it. We know, we know." Mr. and Mrs. Shaw waved at him, telling him to hurry back to school. Seeing this, he didn't look back again and walked towards the bus stop. The Shaw family home and a university were both in the suburbs, but in different directions. So every time he went home and returned to school, he had to take a bus for over 2 hours and even had to transfer once. Fortunately, these 2 bus routes were usually not crowded, and most of the time Ethan could find a seat. The bus swayed along, whether it was because he was really tired, or because the atmosphere was just too conducive to sleeping, or for some other reason. Even though he had just woken up not long ago, he fell into a deep sleep soon after getting on the bus. Ethan had a dream. In the dream, he was an observer, watching a well-dressed, high-powered CEO. He was admired and pursued by many. What left the deepest impression on Ethan was the young girl who had been with the man since she was a child. Ethan couldn't see her face clearly, but he instinctively knew that the girl must be very important. She was 10 years younger than him. When she saw him, she would always sweetly call him uncle. She had no parents and relied on the man the most. That reliance had, at some point, transformed into love. Chapter 17, she confessed her love. Surprisingly, although Ethan could feel the man's heart flutter when he heard her confession, in the end, he just coldly pushed her away. "I am your uncle. I only see you as a child." Hearing this, Ethan couldn't help but sneer and curse under his breath, "Liar, hypocrite." The bus passed over a bumpy, potholed road. The continuous shaking woke Ethan from his sleep. He looked outside and realized that because he had slept so soundly, he had missed his stop. Startled, he quickly got off at the next stop. The distance between the 2 stops was quite far, and it would take some time to walk back. He walked back along the side of the road, his mind replaying the dream he just had. But for some reason, he could remember very little. After thinking hard for a while, apart from the last words he had said, "Liar, hypocrite," he couldn't remember anything else from the dream. A sudden sense of loss washed over him. He didn't know what he had forgot. He only vaguely felt that it must have been very important. Because he had missed his stop, he wasted a lot of time. By the time Ethan got back to school, it was almost 8 o'clock. The 8-person dormitory didn't offer much private space. It was summer, and the night brought no relief from the heat. In fact, accompanied by the chirping of cicadas, a wave of heat rolled in. The dorm had air conditioning, but no one was willing to turn it on. Only the old fan on the ceiling was still whirring away. Ethan read for a while and then went to bed. He wondered if he would dream again, if it would pick up where the dream on the bus left off. He wanted to know what happened next. He wanted to know who that girl was. It sounded like a fool's dream, but he had a strong premonition that he would definitely see it. His roommates were a bit puzzled to see him go to bed so early today. After all, Ethan was always the most hardworking one. The dorm lights didn't turn off, but the other roommates needed to rest. At the beginning, Ethan hadn't considered this and had kept the lights on to read, disturbing his roommates a few times. After it was pointed out, he quickly corrected his behavior. But what he changed wasn't his reading, but the location of his reading. Usually, after they had all fallen asleep, he would take his book and go outside to read for a while longer. Today was a rare exception. He was the first to go to bed. Ethan didn't explain. It was just one early night. There was nothing to explain. Seeing that he was about to fall asleep, the others didn't press the matter and also quieted down. He had a good night's sleep. The only thing that disappointed Ethan was that he didn't dream of those two people again. Today was Monday. According to a university's tradition, there was a flag-raising ceremony every Monday before the first class, but only freshmen participated in the ceremony. Although it was nearing the end of the semester and the weekly flag-raising had been changed to once a month, unfortunately for Ethan, he was a freshman this year. And this week happened to be a flag-raising day. At 6:30 in the morning, Ethan washed up and rushed to the athletic field. The student council members were already there by the flagpole. He just glanced over and immediately saw a girl in the crowd. Her face was still heavy with sleepiness. She was rubbing her eyes and talking to the person next to her, exuding a strong, youthful student vibe. The sound of his heart pounding echoed in his ears. He stood there, stunned, unable to move another step. Although he had never seen the face of the girl in his dream clearly, and everything that had happened in the dream had been erased from his mind when he woke up. At this moment, looking at the girl in front of him, a voice deep inside him was screaming, "It's her, it's her." His roommate, who had come with him, saw him staring intently in that direction and followed his gaze. Realizing who he was looking at, he couldn't help but put his arm around his shoulder and laugh. Well, it looks like our star student Ethan is falling in love. Chapter 18, the teasing voice was right next to him, but to Ethan's ears, it seemed to be drifting from afar. Everything was blocked out. At this moment, his eyes were only on that girl. It wasn't until his roommate slapped him hard on the back, bringing him back to his senses with some exasperation. "All right, that's enough. It's almost time for the flag raising. Stop staring like that. If you like her, find a chance to get to know her. Otherwise, you can stand here all day and it won't do any good." His roommate dragged him forward, and he finally came to his senses, looking away and walking ahead. On the other side, Cecilia Payne also sensed a persistent gaze on her. She looked in the direction she felt it coming from, but the crowd was moving, and it was impossible to tell who was looking. Puzzled, she looked away. The person next to her, seeing her looking around, glanced at the student council president who was about to go on stage and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" The gaze she had just felt was gone. Cecilia thought she was just imagining things and shook her head. "Nothing, I'm probably just too tired." "Who told you to go to bed so late last night when you knew you had to be here for the flag raising today?" Sharon Morgan rubbed her head, then after a pause, let Cecilia's head rest on her shoulder and continued, "You don't have class this morning. You can go back and rest after the ceremony. For now, you can borrow my shoulder." "Sharon, you're the best." Cecilia rested her head on Sharon's shoulder, found a comfortable position, and actually fell asleep. Listening to her light breathing, Sharon felt like crying. How could she fall asleep like this? Just how tired is she? After a sigh, she shifted her position to shield her with her body, so others wouldn't see. Flag-raising ceremonies were always filled with long speeches from various leaders. What was supposed to be 3 points always turned into 3 major points, with countless sub-points. By the time everything was over, it was already 7:30. The campus was gradually getting more crowded. Cecilia, who had snuck in a short nap, was now fully awake and was pulling Sharon along, discussing what to have for breakfast. If I had known that being in the student council meant I'd still have to attend flag-raising ceremonies as a sophomore, I would have never joined in the first place. Cecilia said with a yawn, repeating the same line for the umpteenth time. "You've been saying that since the first flag-raising ceremony of our sophomore year. Please, give my ears a break. You weren't singing this tune when you were getting the student council credits." Sharon's face was full of despair. Unlike someone who had been sleeping through the leader's speeches, she had listened to the entire long-winded affair. But thankfully, this was the last flag-raising ceremony of the semester. By the next one, they would be juniors. Then, they wouldn't be responsible for this part anymore. "What do you want for breakfast?" Cecilia chuckled and quickly changed the subject. The two of them walked towards the cafeteria, arm in arm, not noticing that a few meters behind them, Ethan had been following her the whole time. The cafeteria wasn't crowded, which gave Cecilia and Sharon a good chance to choose. After wandering around the cafeteria, they each bought a bowl of porridge. The porridge was very hot, and perhaps because the cafeteria lady saw that the only customers were two small, slender girls, she was extra generous, filling each of their bowls to the brim. This made it difficult for them to move to a new spot. Cecilia carefully held her bowl, afraid that one wrong move would cause her to spill it. She was about to find a seat when she turned and bumped into a passing boy. Chapter 19, the porridge bowl instantly tipped over, spilling most of its contents onto the other side, with some splashing onto the passing boy. The only fortunate thing was that Cecilia wasn't scalded. Not expecting the porridge to be so hot, Ethan couldn't help but suck in a sharp breath as he felt the pain on his chest and stomach. Hearing his cry of pain, Cecilia was startled and quickly asked, "Hey, are you okay?" Ethan took a few deep breaths and finally recovered, waving his hand at Cecilia. "I'm fine. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I made you spill your porridge. Let me buy you a new one." He apologized so quickly that Cecilia was momentarily taken aback. Who gets hurt and immediately apologizes and offers to compensate? Besides, it wasn't entirely his fault. "No, it's fine. I can buy it myself." She looked at the spilled porridge on the floor with some regret, but still shook her head at him. She took out a tissue from her pocket and handed it to him, pointing at the porridge on his clothes with concern in her eyes. "The porridge isn't expensive, but are you sure the burn is okay?" Ethan took the tissue from Cecilia, carefully pulled his shirt away from his skin to wipe off the porridge, and then gave her an embarrassed smile. Sharon, who had just put down her porridge and returned, was shocked to see them like this. "What happened?" After Cecilia briefly explained, Sharon looked at the sparsely populated cafeteria, then at the man who was still lingering, and suddenly understood something. But she didn't say anything to Cecilia, instead laughing out loud. "They say you can't get to know someone without a fight. You two didn't fight, but this is still fate." Then she leaned in and whispered to Cecilia, "He's pretty handsome. What do you think? Want to get his contact info and get to know him?" Without waiting for Cecilia's reply, she extended her hand to him. "Her name is Cecilia Payne, and I'm Sharon Morgan. We're both sophomores. What's your name?" Hearing the word sophomore, Ethan was stunned for a moment, but then he came to his senses and introduced himself. "Nice to meet you, seniors. My name is Ethan Shaw. I'm a freshman." Sharon raised an eyebrow, her eyes twinkling with amusement as she looked at Cecilia. "Oh, he's a junior." The three of them exchanged contact information. After returning to the dorm, Cecilia finally realized something was off. "Are you hiding something from me?" Am I?" Sharon turned to Cecilia, her eyes full of confusion. "What am I hiding from you?" Suddenly, as if she had just realized something, her eyes widened and her voice grew louder. "No way, you still haven't figured it out. That junior likes you. There were other people in the dorm." Since they didn't have to attend the flag-raising ceremony, they wouldn't be getting up until at least noon if they didn't have classes. Rustling sounds came from behind the separate bed curtains. Cecilia's ears instantly turned bright red. She quickly went over and covered Sharon's mouth, hushing her. "What are you talking about? We've only met once, and you're already saying things like that. Besides, you're so loud. Are you trying to wake everyone up?" Sharon defiantly pulled Cecilia's hand away, about to argue, when another head popped out from behind a bed curtain, her eyes burning with gossip. What? Who likes who?" Chapter 20, after finally calming down the chattering in the dorm, Cecilia was about to rest for a bit when her phone buzzed with a notification. She looked down and saw it was from Ethan. "Senior, I'm really sorry about spilling your porridge today. How about I treat you to a meal another day?" A head popped over her shoulder and saw the message on her screen, followed by Sharon's familiar voice. "See, he even wants to treat you to a meal. I heard his family is not well off. If this isn't love, what is?" The moment she heard that Ethan's family was not well off, Cecilia frowned instinctively. For some reason, when she heard them talk about his family's financial situation, the image that came to her mind was that his family should be very wealthy. But it wasn't until Sharon mentioned his family's situation that Cecilia suddenly remembered that she had heard the name Ethan Shaw before. After all, he was last year's top science student. He had better options, but he chose the local A university for his parents. This had caused quite a stir at the time. Some praised his filial piety, while others lamented that he was being held back by his parents. After all, if he had chosen a better school, his future would have been much brighter. But he himself had dismissed it all. He had said that he believed his abilities wouldn't be affected by a single school. In this story, what was as much in the spotlight as his grades was his family background. Since high school, the Shaw family's income had basically depended on Ethan. With this in mind, she first squeezed past her gossiping roommates, quickly retreated to her own bed, and drew the curtain. Then she typed out a thoughtful message and sent it. "It's really not necessary, Junior. You should be focusing on your studies right now. The finals are coming up, and I'm sure with your abilities, you'll have no problem getting the scholarship." It was a tactful rejection. If she, because of a bowl of porridge, made someone who relied on scholarships and part-time jobs treat her to a meal, she would feel a bit guilty. After thinking about it, Cecilia decided not to delete his contact. After all, he hadn't explicitly said anything, and she felt it would be rude to just delete him. But from that day on, the two of them started to contact each other more and more, and Cecilia gradually got to know Ethan. At first, he would just find various excuses, either asking for her help or seeking her advice to get closer. Cecilia would always agree. At first, she felt that as a member of the student council, it was her duty to help a junior in need. Later, she found that he would sometimes come to her for things that he could clearly solve himself. Logically, she could have refused many times, but Cecilia didn't know why. It seemed that when it came to Ethan, she always found it hard to say no. Time flew by, and finally, on the 500th day of their acquaintance, Ethan decided to confess. By then, Cecilia was a senior. A university had its first snow of the year. A thick layer covered the ground and buildings. Clumps of snow fell from the sky like countless torn cotton balls, looking especially beautiful under the streetlights. Cecilia was wearing a thick cotton coat, the hood blocking most of the snow, but her bangs were still covered in a thin layer. She was walking side by side with Ethan on the athletic field. There were still boys and girls chasing each other with snowballs on the track. As they walked, a couple ran past them and almost bumped into Cecilia. Ethan instinctively pulled her into his arms. It wasn't until the two had run far away that he, at Cecilia's gentle push, his face flushed red, quickly let her go. Chapter 21, You Asked Me Out Today. Is there something you want to talk about? Cecilia tried her best to suppress the strange feeling in her heart and asked in as normal a tone as possible. His face was still flushed, and at her question, it turned even redder. He took out a bag from his coat and handed it to Cecilia, his voice becoming smaller as he spoke. "Senior, this is for you." Seeing that he was giving her a gift, Cecilia quickly pushed the bag back, waving her hand to refuse. But as if he had anticipated her reaction and thoughts, he took the contents out of the bag directly. It was a white knitted scarf. Upon closer inspection, you could see the uneven stitches, a clear sign that it was not store-bought, and Ethan's next words confirmed this. "I don't have much money right now, so I can't give you anything expensive, Senior. I knitted this scarf myself. It's my first time, so it's a bit clumsy. I hope you don't mind." His words were full of subtle intentions, and combined with his slightly flushed face, if it had been anyone else, seeing such a sincere Ethan, they probably wouldn't have been able to say no. But Cecilia stared blankly at the scarf he was holding out. After a long pause, as if she had just realized what he was saying, she waved her hands in a panic, her face flushing. "I'm sorry, I can't accept this. A hand-knitted scarf. If it's just to express gratitude, this gift isn't really appropriate, is it?" She explained patiently. It was meant to be a polite refusal, but it gave him an opening to press further. He seized the opportunity and, without any embellishment, confessed the words that had been hidden in his heart for so long. "Then, Senior, can you give me a chance to be your boyfriend?" During their year and a half of getting to know each other, Ethan had been really good to her. It would be a lie to say she had never felt anything for him. She just hadn't expected him to confess at this moment. It was so sudden, it caught her completely off guard, leaving her with no time to prepare. As Cecilia's face flushed with embarrassment, Ethan took another step closer, his eyes deep and affectionate, pressing on. "Senior, can I put the scarf on for you?" She was still blushing, silent, but she didn't refuse his approach. Seeing her silent consent, a flicker of joy flashed in Ethan's eyes and his smile widened. He carefully took the scarf and stepped forward to wrap it around her neck. The size was just right. Not too loose, not too tight, not too long, not too short. The close proximity made Cecilia feel his warm breath on her ear, making her face turn even redder. White is a very versatile color. Cecilia's skin was very fair, and even against the backdrop of the snow and the white scarf, it didn't lose its luster. The blush on her cheeks, whether from shyness or the cold, added a touch of color to her face, making her look more vibrant and less pale. "So, Cecilia, are you willing to give me a chance?" His sudden question made Cecilia even more nervous. When she opened her mouth, she couldn't even form a proper sentence. What chance? As soon as she said it, she realized how foolish her question was. Just as she was regretting it, she heard his laughter. Ethan's voice was gentle. Looking at the Cecilia in front of him, it was as if he was looking at a frightened rabbit, afraid that a slightly harsher tone would scare her away. He patiently repeated himself, not hiding his feelings at all. "Give me a chance to be your boyfriend. Cecilia, I like you. I like you very, very much. Although I don't have much money right now, as long as you believe in me and give me enough time, I will give you the best of everything in this world." As the words left his mouth, Ethan felt a heavy weight lift from his heart. He took a deep breath, his eyes already showing a sense of certainty. Looking at Cecilia's reaction, he could already feel that success was within his grasp. This time, Cecilia didn't remain silent. She looked up at Ethan, who was a head taller than her despite being younger, and the word "yes" was about to escape her lips. But at that very moment, a sharp pain shot through her mind. Her face instantly turned pale, her lips trembled, and she couldn't utter another word. In the last second before she lost consciousness, all she saw was Ethan's panicked figure catching her. Chapter 22, Cecilia had a very long dream. She couldn't see the faces of the main characters in the dream, but for some reason, she just knew that the people in the dream were them. In the dream, there was a man with the same name as Ethan but a different surname. He wasn't a poor student, but the heir to the Shaw Group. He was the uncle who would rather move out of the Shaw family home and give up his inheritance to raise the girl with the same name as her but a different surname, who was frail and sickly from a young age. He was the one who doted on her the most. He raised her, gave her his exclusive affection, and truly gave her the moon when she asked for the stars. From 8 to 18, he raised her for a full decade, but she shamelessly fell in love with her elder. No one understood her, including the uncle who used to dote on her the most. The man named Ethan Shaw instantly withdrew all the love he had once offered her and began a continuous series of blind dates until he brought back a fiancée who satisfied him in every way. He thought this would make her give up. But later, when the girl named Cecilia Payne was robbed at home and stabbed again and again, he was still the first and only person she thought of. She called him, but he didn't answer. Because that day, he said his fiancée had a fever, and he had to be with her all day. When did Uncle start to not care about Cecilia? It seemed to be from the day she mustered the courage to confess her love. He became increasingly cold to her until finally, she died, her body stuffed into a wardrobe by the murderer. Cecilia didn't even get to see her beloved uncle one last time. Her soul lingered by her body, unwilling to leave. Although souls have no emotions, Cecilia could still feel her sorrow. Her uncle didn't want her anymore. Cecilia also saw her make a deal with the King of Hell after her death, trading her soul's existence for 7 days with him. And the first thing he said when he saw her again was to blame her for calling him too many times that day. She saw him force her to eat when she couldn't consume mortal food as a ghost, just because of his fiancé's words. Even when it made her vomit in pain, he only blamed her for throwing a childish tantrum to embarrass his fiancé. Cecilia also saw the love letters she never got to open that day. In the dream, she saw that after she left, he opened those letters. At the end of each one was a familiar signature Cecilia Payne. Although she had seen with her own eyes that Cecilia's deal with the King of Hell was over and her soul had truly been scattered, there was still a lingering thought in Cecilia's mind. Cecilia Payne was her. And the rest of the dream completely verified this thought. She saw what happened after Cecilia disappeared. She saw Ethan Shaw, who had become so distraught after discovering Cecilia's death that he had lost his mind. She saw him, after being completely abandoned by the Shaw family, still unrepentant, even attempting suicide. She saw him lying in a bathtub full of bloody water, gradually losing his breath. Then he came to the underworld, met the King of Hell, and made a deal with him. She was given this life as Cecilia Payne, with a wealthy family, living and loving parents, but without him, because he had traded all his future lives and all his wealth for a life where they would have no connection. Cecilia saw the King of Hell again, but this time it wasn't to take her life. The King of Hell told Cecilia everything, and then gave the choice back to her. Now that she knew everything, she could make the final decision: to choose to forgive or to separate them and see them as two different people. The current Ethan Shaw was indeed very different from the original Ethan Shaw. But when Cecilia remembered everything, she found that she still couldn't accept it. Whether he was Ethan Shaw the CEO or Ethan Shaw the student, whether he was her uncle or her junior, she couldn't accept it. Chapter 23, it wasn't that Cecilia regretted it. The words she had said before her soul dissipated still stood. Though she had regrets, she did not repent. But at that time, there was one more thing she hadn't said. If there was a next life, she didn't want to love Ethan Shaw again. That day, she really thought she would just disappear. But now that she had a chance to live again, she didn't want to be entangled with him again. She wanted to live for herself this time. When Cecilia woke up from her slumber, it was already the next afternoon. The pungent smell of disinfectant and the pure white ceiling, the faint pain from the needle on the back of her hand, and the IV drip hanging to the side instantly told her where she was. She turned her head. Ethan was by her bed. He was slumped over the side of the bed, seemingly not sleeping well. She could vaguely see the stubble on his chin, a sign that he hadn't rested well all night. In the past, she might have felt sorry for him or even been moved. But now, looking at him, her heart was filled with mixed emotions. When the King of Hell came to her, he had also mentioned one more thing. When Ethan made the deal with him, deciding to trade all his future lives and wealth for one last life with her, both of them were supposed to have their memories erased. But Ethan had somehow managed to keep a part of his memory and had even obtained a fate stone somewhere, on which he had carved their names. This was why Cecilia and Ethan, one with only vague memories and the other with no memory at all, were still drawn to each other. So the King of Hell came, told Cecilia the whole truth, and gave her memories back. Her thoughts returned from her memories, and her gaze fell back on Ethan's face. From her past life to this one, he had always been so dictatorial. He had chosen to push her away when she loved him, and now that she had made up her mind to give up on him, he had come back, willing to sacrifice everything just to be with her. Cecilia gently raised her hand, her fingers hovering over his face, lightly tracing his features. "Uncle, the obstacle between us was never our age. It was always you." Her touch was light, but because he was a light sleeper, he still woke up. Seeing Cecilia awake, the joy and fear in Ethan's eyes were palpable. He fumbled to press the call button, but she grabbed his hand. "I'm fine, no need to call a doctor." After a pause, her tone returned to the distant one she had used when they first met. "I'll pay you back for the medical expenses. Thank you for bringing me to the hospital." She watched as the light in his eyes shattered. Her own heart ached, but in the end, she left him with no hope. "Ethan Shaw, I will never like you. We are not suitable for each other." He was stunned by her answer. "Not suitable, but senior, haven't we been getting along so well all this time? Why do you say you won't like me?" And right before you fainted, you were about to say yes. Ethan didn't say the last sentence out loud. He was afraid that if he said it, he would find out that it had all been his own wishful thinking, his own delusion. He stopped himself just in time, but she, as if she couldn't feel his anxiety and confusion, mercilessly shattered his last shred of dignity. "Getting along well was just because I saw you as a friend. I said I won't like you because I don't like younger men." Cecilia stared at her IV drip. There wasn't much left, but it would last a little longer. After a long pause, she looked at Ethan again, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Ethan Shaw, back then you said I was too young. You were too cowardly to admit your feelings for me, letting my love be worn away by you and your fiancé, bit by bit. And now I'm giving it all back to you. Ethan Shaw, you can go now. From the moment I made the deal with the King of Hell, I never expected you to come back for me. You didn't come back for me then. And I certainly don't need you to now. Chapter 24. In the end, Ethan left. Shortly after Cecilia had completed her own discharge procedures, he received the medical fees she had sent him. He didn't want to accept it, but her next sentence left him with no room to refuse. Junior, your family's financial situation isn't great, so don't be too proud. I can fully afford my own medical bills. I would feel bad if you had to take on another part-time job because of me. Ethan lowered his head in embarrassment. Perhaps because of the dreams he had been having more and more frequently, his behavior was becoming more and more like the man in the dream. But the man in the dream was the heir to the Shaw Group, a rising star in the business world who could start from scratch even after a falling out with his family. And Ethan Shaw was just a poor student with nothing, who hadn't even graduated yet. Back in the dorm, he collapsed onto his bed, dejected, unable to understand why everything had been going so well, only for it all to change overnight. The dorm suddenly became noisy outside. Ethan glanced at the time and realized it was when classes let out. Through the window, he could occasionally see students walking by in twos and threes, chatting as they went. Even the hallway was filled with youthful energy, a stark contrast to the deathly silence in his room. The door was suddenly pushed open, and light streamed in from outside, illuminating the dim dorm but leaving the bed by the door in shadow. Several of his roommates came in, some talking about school, others about other things. For a moment, no one noticed that Ethan was back. It wasn't until later in the evening, when the light was switched on with a click, that his roommates, still not seeing him, muttered, "That kid Ethan, he's usually the most serious one. What's up with him today? He missed a whole day of classes and he's still not back this late." Another person heard him and laughed. "What do you know? Hasn't that kid been knitting a scarf lately? He just finished it a couple of days ago. He's probably out on a date." "A date? With that girl from the student council?" "That's the one." The discussion continued, but the person at the center of it all just frowned, turned over, and kept his eyes tightly shut, as if still asleep. It was this movement that finally made them see him. They were all startled and fell silent. Seeing no other movement or words from him, they realized he was already asleep. After a strange exchange of glances, someone wanted to say something, but in the end, they just shook their heads and said nothing. Ethan didn't hear their conversation. He was dreaming of those two people again. The difference was, this time he saw their faces clearly. He was shocked to find that the two people were him and Cecilia. Ethan watched from an observer's perspective as the story progressed towards its predetermined tragic ending. He wanted to stop it, to tell the man in the dream. Perhaps his desire was so strong that he actually possessed the body of Ethan Shaw, controlling it to answer the phone when Cecilia called for help. He pushed away the woman named Yvonne, trying with all his might to make it up to Cecilia, and finally managed to get her to open her heart to him again. But unexpectedly, when the seventh day came, he still had to watch her die in front of him. Her soul scattered. At that last moment, she lay in his arms, gently caressing his face. "Uncle, I never regretted loving you. But Ethan Shaw, I really don't love you anymore." The dream suddenly shattered. His vision went black. Ethan stumbled forward, fumbling in the darkness. In a daze, he realized his memories were fading. Where is this? He didn't know. Why am I here? He didn't know. Who am I? His eyes were filled with confusion. A huge, ferocious face appeared before him. He instinctively asked, "Who are you? Who am I? Why am I here?" The face replied, "You don't need to know any of this. You only need to know that you violated your deal with me. So, I have come to collect the rest of your time." Ethan Shaw died. His roommates found out the next day when they tried to wake him up for class, only to discover he was no longer breathing. The news quickly reached Cecilia's ears. When she heard it, she was lost in thought for a long time. After a while, she let out a soft laugh. "Ethan Shaw, why did you have to do this? In truth, I never needed you to come back."